Welcome to First Mover, your first global look at today's action in the Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital asset space. I'm your host, Christine Lee, and joining me is my co-host, Coindesk Managing Editor of Global Capital Markets, Lawrence Luton. Emily Parker's off. Good morning, Lawrence. Great to see you.
Hey, hello, Christine. Welcome back.
Hope you had a good Rosh Hashanah. Let's take a quick look at the markets. The Coindesk Bitcoin price XBX index is currently trading at $46,890. Bitcoin is slightly up about 1.1% over the past 24 hours, and the Coindesk Ether price ETX index is trading at 35.05. ETH also slightly up, almost 3%. And the new DFX Coindesk's DeFi index is currently trading at 592, also up about 2.25% right now. So Lawrence, we did see a bit of a correction in Bitcoin on Tuesday when El Salvador had the Bitcoin law officially come into place. What's going with the markets now? And I did see your newsletter. I saw Solana is doing great.
Yeah, Solana's hot. I mean, look, this is what we're seeing right now is some interest in the alts, a lot of interest in the alts, and a lowering of interest in Bitcoin. So we're seeing kind of a rotation of money or other assets leaving Bitcoin and going to those alts, the NFT related alts such as Solana, such as Ethereum even. We were talking before the show and I was saying how on my anniversary dinner, my wife was on her phone buying NFTs throughout the entire dinner, which tells you how interesting
romantic.
I am. So romantic. Thanks. Love you, honey. But yeah, she was on buying NFTs even at that like very important dinner. And that tells you kind of what's going on right now is that there's a lot of interest in that.
Okay. Also, big news, Coinbase wants to launch a lending program that offers about 4% in annual percentage yield. Coinbase tried to talk about it with the SEC, and the SEC basically said, well, if you launch that product, you will be sued. Yeah. Surprising to you, Lawrence?
That the SEC said that at the moment, it's a little bit surprising considering it's a public company. Nonetheless, I think we're going to see a lot more scrutiny. You know, people were hoping with Gary Gensler going on the SEC that there would be a lot more crypto-friendly regulation. But in fact, the guy knows a lot about crypto. And that means that that the SEC has more of an insight into how crypto works than perhaps previous administrations did. And that could be to the detriment of a lot of crypto companies, which may be a little bit too fast and loose with some of the rules here, though I wouldn't say necessarily that's the case for Coinbase. But if you're hoping Gary Gensler is going to make things easy for you,
guess again.
Maybe reconsider that. Yeah.
All right, let's discuss further with our spotlight guest.
The Coindesk Spotlight is brought to you by Nexo, the place to earn on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more.
Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong tweeting the SEC is, quote, refusing to offer any opinion in writing to the industry on what should be allowed and why, and instead are engaging in intimidation tactics behind closed doors. Whatever the theory is here, it feels like a reach land grab versus other regulators. Is this true? Is this a way for the SEC to claim authority over crypto? Joining us now to discuss is former CFTC chair, author of Crypto Dad, and senior counsel at Willkie, Farr, and Gallagher, Chris Giancarlo in New York. Welcome to the show, Chris, and very much looking forward to your book launch in October 26th. But before we get to that, I would like to hear, what do you make of Coinbase's roadblock with the SEC and their CEO's claim that the SEC is after a land grab versus other U.S. regulators?
Morning, Christine. It's good to be with you. Lawrence, good to see you again. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be with you this morning. I read Brian Armstrong's tweets, I guess, along with all the rest of us. And it's not my practice to be critical of people that are in those regulatory chairs, having been in one myself and benefited greatly from my predecessors not criticizing my work. But I will tell you, and it's something I actually talk about in my book, is that the chairs have a fair amount of discretion in terms of applying rule sets. And one of the things that we faced at the CFTC is we realized that a lot of our rule sets really weren't applicable to this new innovation, to crypto itself. And in fact, in one case in 2017, some of our rules defined what is physical delivery of crypto and defined that in really very analog ways. And we realized it really didn't make a lot of sense in the world of crypto. And so what we did was suspended enforcement activity while we clarified our rules. And we put out some rule clarifications at the end of 2017 to explain what does physical delivery mean in the world of crypto. And until we felt that until our rules were clear, how could we then create a sort of a jeopardy situation for firms that were trying to comply with rules that were not clear? And so our priority was to clarify our rules and then look at enforcement activity. Now, as I say, every chair has got discretion in this area, but that was the approach we took, and it's something that I've explained in my book, how that discretion works and why it's so important for this new innovation that we not apply 90-year-old statutes, which is effectively what we have for the Commodities Exchange Act and for the SEC, against a new innovation that was never contemplated in the 1930s when those statutes were written.
Chris, it's interesting you say that because people were very optimistic about SEC Chair Gary Gensler coming on board because he's very knowledgeable about crypto. He taught classes at MIT on it. He was touted as being crypto friendly, but even Coinbase's Brian Armstrong is now saying he's not so sure about that. And you've been touted as crypto dad, so perhaps you can relate. Would you have handled things differently in Gensler's shoes?
Well, here's what I would say. There's this innovation presents the opportunity to solve some of the worst elements of our existing structure, and the worst elements are its slowness, its expensiveness, and probably most unfortunate, its exclusiveness. Basically, we have a system now that if you don't have identity, you can't use payment system, and more importantly, if you're not wealthy, you can't invest in the best opportunities in the marketplace. And this innovation basically solves all those problems: speed, latency, cost, exclusivity, and it's brought in a whole new generation, not necessarily wealthy people, but ordinary people into the marketplace. People that haven't been excited about Wall Street or banking, in a generation are excited about this. And so what we've got to think about is, do we really want to extend the existing system with its slowness, its latency, its costliness, and its exclusivity to wealthy people? Or do we want to take advantage of some of the opportunities offered by this new technology? And if we do, we need to see it as revolutionary and be willing to be flexible with our existing models, with our existing system, and look to this innovation to modernize those shortcomings of the existing system.
So, Chris, does the SEC, though, really have jurisdiction when it comes to what Coinbase was offering or was planning to offer? Was it really something akin to a security, or was it more of a banking product, or what? How would you describe it?
Well, again, I only know what I've read, and according to Brian Armstrong, the SEC hasn't put forward an explanation of what their authority is. But ultimately, it will be the courts that will have to determine jurisdiction and apply the securities laws to these asset classes. And I'm optimistic that Congress steps in and Congress says, wait a minute, these statutes were written 1933, 1934, 1936 in the case of the CFTC. I mean, there's no way they contemplated this new innovation. So these new innovations. So it's up to regulators in the short term to apply the laws in a sensible, practical, responsible manner. And long term, it's necessary for Congress to step in and probably come up with a new approach to this innovation, recognizing its potential to solve shortcomings of our existing financial system.
Chris, last time you were here, thanks to our federal system, states also regulate companies, of course, and financial products. And last time you were here, we talked about you joining BlockFi's board. You've since left. Is that related to how New Jersey regulators and other state regulators were viewing BlockFi's or are viewing BlockFi's business and some of the actions they've taken against BlockFi?
Yeah. So, really, my decision with regard to BlockFi is really about my own portfolio rebalancing. I'm on 4 boards. I'm on 5 advisory boards. I've got a foundation, the Digital Dollar Project, which is about to go into hyperdrive. We'll soon be announcing 2 major pilot programs, which are in testing mode right now. And of course, I've now got a book out, or we'll have a book out, and I'm starting a 75-day book tour. And so it's about bandwidth management. It's a conversation I had begun with Zach and the folks at BlockFi weeks before. But I remain an advisor to the company and will be helping them to navigate through the what you mentioned, the attention they're getting from state regulators. And so, look, these are disruptive new technologies. They are going to challenge pillars of the existing system. But in that, as with all new innovations, they both create challenges, but enormous opportunities. What we're looking at is, quite frankly, it's bigger than BlockFi. It's bigger than Coindesk TV. It's bigger than all of us. This is the third wave of the internet. And anybody that thought they could stop the first wave or the second wave have learned their lesson. This innovation is going to overwhelm the existing system. And as I've said, and as I say in my book, we've got choices to make. We can either try to hide from it, try to avoid getting knocked over from it, or we can hitch a sail and try to ride it. And that's what we tried to do at the CFTC during my time there. And I think that's, quite frankly, what we in the United States have historically done with new innovations and new technologies, and what we've got to do with this one.
So are you saying BlockFi is basically facing the same problem that Coinbase is facing, in that the current legal frameworks available just are not up to date to this new technology? And I want to put that in context because they are trying to address this. We have Brian Armstrong tweeting again that the SEC was the only regulator that refused to meet with him, saying, quote, "We're not meeting with any crypto companies." And this was right after Coinbase became the first crypto company to go public in the United States. Is this attitude typical?
Well, again, I'm not going to criticize a fellow regulator. I will tell you what we did at the CFTC. Immediately upon my arrival, I launched Lab CFTC because there was no vehicle at the CFTC then to meet with innovators that could bring face-to-face with innovators, regulators who understood the innovation, understood the challenges it faced, understood where it might be a round peg in a square hole or a square peg in a round hole in terms of the CFTC's existing regulatory structure, and could look to address that. So I think dialogue is critically important, and that's what we did at the CFTC. And I'm pleased to say that I think in many ways, Lab CFTC became a model for other federal and state regulators in terms of how to interact with innovators and this new wave of the internet.
So, Chris, regulators have to, at least federal regulators, come up with what they regulate based on mandates by the Congress. Has Congress learned anything about crypto in recent weeks and recent months? Does it still know a little too little? Or given what we've seen with, for instance, the infrastructure bill, does it know a little too much to the point that they're willing and wanting to severely hamper the industry in the United States?
Well, Congress has certainly recognized that crypto is an area that can be taxed in order to raise revenue for other projects. So in some ways, Congress has very much, and that's perhaps a bit of a snarky view on my part, but certainly Congress in the last few months has really recognized crypto. And as my former colleague Jeff Bandman notes, in some small way, that crypto now is part of the landscape because it's a source of revenue for Congress and its tireless efforts to find ways to fund government. What I would say, though, is during the course of that process, I think a lot more congressmen and women and senators have woken up to this technology, how its power and its potential. I'm not saying that's across the board, but it's certainly across the aisle. In my conversations with a number of senators and congressmen and women, I see a growing understanding of this innovation. Now, in some cases, it's concerned to whether it threatens the legacy banking system. In other cases, it's the recognition that actually this innovation might provide solutions to the shortcomings of the existing system. So I actually think there's, aside from the infrastructure bill, I actually think there's a growing awareness of the potential of this in Congress. And ultimately, it will be Congress that's going to have to step in and decide what is U.S. public policy with regard to this innovation, and therefore, what's the best way to effectuate that public policy? What are the best regulatory agencies to do that? Now, of course, no surprise here. I'm a champion for a big role for the CFTC. Why? Because for 4 years, the CFTC has been walking that walk. No other federal regulator here, quite frankly, no other regulator in the world has created a successful, functioning, regulated marketplace for crypto, in this case, crypto derivatives, other than the CFTC. And it's working. The proof is in the pudding. It's a very, very successful regulated marketplace. And so the CFTC has learned a lot. It has developed a lot of expertise. It's developed a lot of surveillance capability. It's a very competent regulator when it comes to crypto, and it deserves a seat at the regulatory table.
Chris, I want to get to your book, Crypto Dad, The Fight for the Future of Money. It will be released on October 26th on Amazon. And I understand that you go into your experiences in Washington, D.C. and how you address crypto in it. Perhaps you could give us some of the highlights.
I went to the CFTC in 2014, really to complete the reforms to the global swaps market. I had been following the development of crypto, and I talk a little bit about that in the book as a minority commissioner. But it really developed in 2017 with the Bitcoin rally 1.0 and the approach we received from several of our key exchanges to license Bitcoin futures, or to greenlight the launch of Bitcoin futures. And in the book, I talk about really a lot of the sort of both subtle and not so subtle opposition that we face. I mean, calls from overseas regulators saying, if you do this, you're legitimizing Bitcoin and you're going to cause the collapse of the financial system around the world, and a lot of opposition. But we went forward anyway, and I explained why that was and why that was the right thing to do. And as a result, if you are operating a crypto derivative marketplace under the CFTC regs, you know where you stand. The guidelines are clear. The market is working. The CFTC has moved forward as the world's foremost regulator in the space. And I think it was because we had the courage to move forward and not be held back by, doom and gloom and FUD assertions by both official people in Washington, but also in the press and otherwise. So it's a story about that, but it's also a look forward as to what do we need to do for crypto going forward, how this really provides solutions to the shortcomings, the exclusivity, the financial under-inclusion of our existing system, the slowness, the legacy, the latency of it. And then also it talks about sovereign digital currency, central bank digital currency. I believe every major economy will develop central bank digital currency in the next decade. And right now, the United States is leading from behind. And I think there's unfortunate ramifications if we continue on that course of being not a leader, but a laggard in that development of digital money.
So, Chris, I have to ask you, since you touched on the subject of at least central bank digital currencies, did you also talk about stablecoins, specifically Tether? While you were running the CFTC, of course, you guys subpoenaed Tether and Bitfinex and what have you. Was it related to their belief that they were issuing Tether without backing, or was it related to the assets that they claimed backed those Tether?
It was my policy as chairman of the agency not to comment on enforcement matters when I was at the agency, and it's still my policy today not to comment on enforcement matters since I've left the agency. So I have no comment on that.
Okay, but Tether did tell us at least that they couldn't give their exact assets because they're too similar. At least it would be giving away their secret sauce. Like, for instance, they claim something like Bridgewater would do. Of course, Bridgewater is a fund. They release what they do. How is that different? The assets hold that a stablecoin like that holds. How would that differ from, let's say, what a digital dollar would do, the digital dollar concept?
I do talk about stablecoins quite a bit in my book. And it is my personal view that even if the United States develops a digital dollar, which I expect it will, that it should not suppress the development of stablecoins. For one, the United States has a lot to learn from stablecoin development. Again, this has been going on for years while the United States is still studying the subject. The United States government can learn a lot from stablecoins. Number two, I think the development of stablecoins may, in a way, keep a central bank digital currency honest. And why do I say that? Well, one of the big concerns that I raise in the book is issues of privacy and censorship in terms of a central bank digital currency. Right now, your cash money can't be censored, and its use is entirely private. Those are values, along with the rule of law and free speech and free markets, that need to be encoded in a digital currency. And if there is no choice but a digital currency, then it could be a problem if the United States government or other governments sought to censor use of that digital currency or invade people's privacy in their use of the digital currency. And the availability of alternatives, whether they be Bitcoin or stable coins, in many ways will keep governments honest in perhaps misguided attempts to either censor use of digital money or invade people's privacy and gather information on how people use digital currency. So I'm a fan of proper, innovative stablecoin development. Although, I am very sensitive to concerns raised by my predecessor at the CFTC, Tim Massad, in various articles about stablecoins, lack of transparency, lack of clear rules of the road. And there too, I think Congress has a role to play in developing guidelines for stablecoin construction and operation and disclosure.
Chris, speaking of stablecoins, you're the co-founder of the Digital Dollar Foundation, so I wonder what you see in the future there. And is the dollar's status as a reserve currency in the world put in jeopardy as other nations look to create their own CBDCs and, in the case of El Salvador, make Bitcoin legal tender?
Yeah, so look, there's a lot of people, I think, well, not a lot, but there's some people running around, the sky is falling, the United States dollar is going to lose its global reserve currency if we don't move forward faster with the digital dollar. I'm not one of them. I think the dollar has so many strong underpinnings. Its role in the global economy perhaps is never been greater than it is now, and will endure for a long time to come. Having said that, since the dawn of time, one feature that has made one currency in history great, more important than another currency, has been technological features. The dollar is named after the Spanish dollar, which had technological superiority over other currencies because it was fractionable, because you could divide it into 8 equal pieces known as pieces of 8. That was a technological advantage over other currencies and helped that currency, along with the fact that it was minted with better silver than the others, a global reserve currency of its time. And so we do need to be conscious of technological superiority that digitization of currency will provide. And let's be sanguine about what China's doing. China's not just developing a digital yuan. It's much bigger than that. China is looking to develop the first fully digitally networked economy where transactions, whether they be in futures or in equities or commercial lending or payment transfers, will all be networked using blockchain technology into a unified whole. All transactions in the digital yuan will be part of this amazingly networked economy, offering much greater speed, much lower cost, much greater inclusion, and an ability to send an already fast-growing economy into hyperdrive by taking out that cost and latency. So the United States needs to think about a digital currency in more than just a payment, digital payments, but more about wringing out costs from the U.S. economy. We know we pay more than most other countries for payments in the United States. We know we have over 5% of our population excluded from our system. We know, let's be honest, there are shortcomings in our existing system. Let's address them. Let's take advantage of this technology to address the shortcomings in systems in the way we've taken advantage of earlier technologies for economic growth and greater inclusion. Let's do the same with this new technology and not throttle it in its early stage with regulations that were designed for a world 90 years ago that are not designed for this world today.
Chris, I hear you. Great conversation. Unfortunately, we've got to wrap it there. Folks, get your copy of Crypto Dad, the future of the future of
the fight for the future of money.
For the future of money. Thank you, Chris. All right, that was Chris Giancarlo, former CFTC Commissioner, Crypto Dad author, and attorney. Coming up, checking in on Asia and the crypto markets update with a decentralized exchange. Daily forecast, an update on what's happening in the Asia crypto markets. Here's Angie Lau of Forecast News.
Welcome to the Daily Forecast, September 9th, 2021. I'm Angie Lau, Editor-in-Chief of Forecast News, covering all things blockchain. Korea's crypto regulation countdown is now, underway as some crypto exchanges face regulatory extinction. Others getting some good news from traditional banking partners. All that and more coming up. Let's get you up to speed from Asia to the world. First up, Korea. There is a face-off coming as the country faces imminent mass closures of crypto exchanges. The Korea FinTech Association has come together to figure out the impact on investors. The association has been highly critical of the financial authorities that forces investors to unwind their tokens and switch to other exchanges that don't actually support those tokens. Forecast News' Danny Park got the lowdown from the association's president, Kim Hyung-jung.
A minimum $2.5 billion US. That's the estimated amount of damage the mass closure of exchanges is going to cause the investors. And that's just the 44 specified cryptos that will disappear. Adding all the native so-called kimchi tokens affected could see the total soar to $8.5 billion. That's the revelation from the forum which gathered industry officials and experts to discuss the deadlock Korea's new regulations have put them in. Members expressed concern that the regulations are deliberately set to work against them, and the Korea FinTech Association's president warned they jeopardize the future of the industry.
한국에서는 혁신적인 금융 사업을 하기가 어려운 거예요. 거기다가 또 한국의 투자자들이 국내 코인에 투자를 하는 게 아니고 해외 코인에다가 투자를 하는 거거든요.
Meanwhile, the head of Korea's Finance Consumer Federation adds that as the regulations may affect many innocent victims, action against the government is a possibility.
일방적인 금융 소비자의 피해에 대해서 사례들을 좀 수집하고 가능하다면 정부에 대한 집단 소송도 한번 준비를 해보도록 하겠습니다.
In more positive news, the remaining three of the Big Four, Bithumb, Coin1, and Corbit, should now be safe after their real name bank account contracts were extended. That means they now comply with both stipulations within the regulations ahead of the September 24 deadline. For Forecast News, I'm Danny Park.
Meanwhile, over in Hong Kong, Initium Media's first NFT collection has completely sold out. The works focus on news events that Initium says had a significant impact. And with stories produced by Hong Kong's recently closed Apple Daily also being preserved via blockchain, could news-based NFTs be on the rise? And why do they matter? Forecast News' Timmy Shen found out more from Initium's executive editor and head of audience development.
The Chinese-language news site, which recently relocated its headquarters from Hong Kong to Singapore, released an NFT collection called The Erased. It features stories of migrant workers from Beijing who were evicted in 2017 as part of the city's low-end population evacuation campaign. The artwork sold for 0.3 ETH, or just over $1,000. Suzy Wu, executive editor of Initium, told Forecast News that NFTs serve as a record of historical moments that could otherwise be easily forgotten. And the outlet's head of audience development, Yongxin Zhang, said it's an interesting way for media companies to seek new revenues. And it is just one sign of a growing trend of embracing NFTs as a storytelling method. In July, Hong Kong's South China Morning Post published a light paper announcing the launch of Artifact, offering a standardized way of recording snippets of history as NFTs that are tradable in the marketplace. For Forecast News, I'm Timmy Shan.
And finally today, demand for crypto mining hardware in the U.S. is showing no signs of letting up. China's Bitmain, one of the world's biggest producers of cryptocurrency mining gear, has sealed a deal with ISW Holdings, a company which is shortly to be renamed Block Quarry. ISW will host 56,000 Bitmain mining rigs and pair it with 200 megawatts of power at the company's Pod City location in Georgia. The company also says it aims to have the first 20 megawatts of power paired with rigs and running next month, with a full rollout complete by October 2022. And that's the daily forecast from our vantage point right here in Asia. For more, visit forecast.news. I'm Editor-in-Chief Angie Lau. Until the next time.
The Crypto Markets Update is presented by Grayscale, the world's largest digital currency asset manager.
Checking in on Bitcoin, the Coindesk Bitcoin price XBX index currently trading at $47,064. Bitcoin slightly up, almost about 1.4% over the past 24 hours. And the Coindesk Ether price ETX index is at 35.39. ETH is also climbing about 3.8%. And the new DFX Coindesk's DeFi index is trading at just under $600. DeFi is up about 3.3%. over the day. The most reliable reference prices for institutions since 2014 are now published under the Coindesk brand, trusted globally as a leader in crypto news, events, and data. And joining us now to discuss the crypto markets is Vincent Yin, co-founder of Decentralized exchange ZK Link. Welcome to the show, Vincent. So we're seeing that the crypto markets are stabilizing after Tuesday's correction. I wonder what kind of opportunities you have been looking at, especially in the DeFi market.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Lawrence, for having me today. It's a great pleasure. So Vince from ZK Link. So we have seen a bit of correction from the last few days of the market. It's when we say a little correction, actually we're talking about like over $10 drop of Bitcoin and over 600 for Ethereum. However, during this correction, some assets like Solana have been able to stay in the green area despite the current market environment. So in Solana's case, this is directly due to Ethereum's network congestion, high gas fee, and price of NFTs. In recent months, Ethereum gas fees have hit new record highs as retail users flock to the platform for NFT trading. We have seen a lot of attention and a lot of interest from new retail users from outside the traditional crypto market to come in for NFTs. Myself, I bought an NFT CryptoPunk for myself, recently with over 100 Ethereum. It's crazy, right? And as a result, new projects have looked to more efficient chains like Solana to launch on. So this has driven a surge in the interest in not only the chain, but also the underlying token and other related token like Ethereum, like FTT, right? Another example is the successful launch of DYDX token yesterday, which reached over 600 million in valuation shortly after launch. This signals a bullish trend for DeFi projects, even as they rest to the market slumps. In the coming week, we may see the blue chip cryptos like Bitcoin and Ethereum lag behind some of the smaller market cap assets, especially in the DeFi sector and probably in the NFT sector as well. DeFi in particular is poised for growth as traders move beyond the centralized decentralized exchanges. So this is, one important thing I do want to mention is the importance for cross-chain liquidity transfer, right? So this has been one of the main barriers for retail users to move from centralized exchange to DeFi, to decentralized exchanges. And there has been a lot of regulatory pressure for centralized exchanges. We've noticed from the last few months towards Binance, towards Coinbase, and FTX is seeking for to become a public company as well. So the cross transfer problem is to move assets from one chain to another easily and safely. If we can solve that problem, it means in the future, more users and more projects, more dApps and more protocols will become successful in this sector. So this, regarding the crypto markets, sorry?
Vince, yeah, I wanted to ask you about the crypto markets. We saw a recent sell-off in Bitcoin, and it was a very sharp decline. It was a very sharp sell-off that would indicate that it was one large order or a few very large orders all at once hitting the market. What do you think actually caused it? You know, the idea of El Salvador as the catalyst is one thing that's been floating out there. But do you suppose that it could be, for instance, somebody who with prior knowledge to what the SEC was going to say about Coinbase? Do you think that somebody, perhaps, or a few people got into the markets and sold off before that became public? Or do you think it really is related to El Salvador? Or is there another reason for such a sharp sell-off all of a sudden?
Okay, so it's very interesting. Actually, myself, I have no clear clue what might be the main driving factor for this huge drop. But one thing to note is that while liquidation accelerated some of the sell-off, the impact was far lower compared with the past. We have seen the 12th of March of last year, right? So we can say that there's much less leverage in the market. And it's obvious that the market has been overheated for the past few months with increased interest from retail users, especially driven by NFTs, because it has outreached to users that is not a crypto user. It means new users are coming in for NFTs. They have a strong interest and are very curious about NFTs and also then it's reached to other tokens like Bitcoins and Ethereum. I'm not very, very sure, what might be the main reason for this sharp. But we have seen that the volatility of this market is very high. But I would say that for this time, the impact is much lower than what we have seen before. So the market has been able to stabilize, for yesterday, just few minutes after this sale.
Vincent, appreciate your insights. Thank you for coming on the show. The NFT market is hot for sure, and we'll continue monitoring it. That was Vincent Yin, co-founder of decentralized exchange ZK Link. Time now to check in with Coindesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day, who is also the editor of Coindesk's The State of Crypto newsletter. Hey there, Nick. So we've got a bit of breaking news. MasterCard announcing that they've acquired CipherTrace to enhance crypto capabilities. What's going on?
Yeah, MasterCard just announced via a press release that it has acquired CipherTrace. Details of the acquisition have not been made public at this time, but the move, it's a surprise move for sure, but it gives MasterCard the ability to track blockchains and the digital assets in particular that are launched on top of them. So a press release said that's over 900 different digital assets, but MasterCard clearly moving to conduct more operations within the crypto ecosystem. It's already, working with a couple of crypto companies to support, different types of digital asset purchases and things like that. But, this is clearly a sign of more to come.
Yeah, Nick, I'd love to hit on that more, but of course this is breaking, so we'll get more information on that. But I do want to touch on, of course, this big thing with the SEC and Coinbase. What do we make of this so far? What do we really what can we really grasp as to what's going on behind the scenes when it comes to the SEC and why and what happened with their relationship with Coinbase?
Yeah, as far as the SEC is concerned, we've been talking for a while now about how the SEC seems to be gearing up to try and either be more active in the crypto industry or to better establish its oversight over different parts of the sectors, including, for example, crypto trading platforms and DeFi, stablecoins, things like that. And it feels like Coinbase is a big player trying to launch a thing that has already existed in some form or another. From various other smaller crypto companies. So it could be that the SEC is trying to is trying to plant a flag in the ground here and say, yeah, we think that this violates securities laws based on these factors. We think that, the Rios test is what applies here. And, from what I've seen online, there have been comparisons made between what Coinbase is doing and, for example, what banks might do. But banks are subject to a much stricter regulatory regime than Coinbase would be should it launch Coinbase Lend. And so the SEC may be trying to fill in the gap here and say, we think that, we're the appropriate regulator to look at this kind of activity.
So
as far as this
relationship with
Coinbase. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, go on. Yeah.
I was going to say, as far as this relationship with Coinbase, I think it's just the fact that Coinbase is one of the biggest players here. So if the SEC feels comfortable with a case against Coinbase, then they could use that as precedent if and when they try to go after other players in the crypto industry also offering these kinds of lending products.
Now, they have very limited resources. Do you think that they would take on, though, some of the state actions against the likes of BlockFi? We just had Chris Giancarlo on just a couple of minutes ago. Do you think that the SEC will maybe look at what they're doing with Coinbase and say, hey, you know what? We could do the same thing to BlockFi, which offers maybe something similar to what Coinbase was planning to offer, or are they going to leave that with the states?
I suspect they'll leave that with the states for now. As you said, the SEC only has so much budget, so many resources that it can dedicate to different actions. They're going to go for, the big obvious players first. They want to get that kind of precedent before they even look at some of these smaller, potentially more difficult cases or potentially, cases that will have less of a, for lack of a better term, reward for them. They want to establish, their bona fides and, if there's already 5 different states investigating BlockFi, so the SEC would just be an additional player adding to the fire. But what could the SEC do that, for example, New Jersey's state securities regulator isn't already doing right now?
And finally, we are hearing that former CFTC Commissioner Brian Quintes is joining as an advisory partner on A16Z's crypto team. What do you think the significance is of that?
Yeah, I mean, for former Commissioner Quintes, obviously this makes sense, right? He's been advocating for crypto. He sponsored the Technology Advisory Committee while he was at the CFTC. It seems perfectly logical that he would want to continue working on, the crypto sector through a firm that has, frankly, been making a lot of moves in the crypto sector recently, especially. It just closed its $2.2 billion Crypto Fund 3 a couple months ago. But, for Andreessen Horowitz, they have been really ramping up their hiring and their work in this industry over the last, I want to say, year or so. But in the last couple of months, especially, it's been bringing on folks from, they've been bringing on former government folks from both sides of the aisle. They've been bringing on folks from crypto startups like Coinbase and Gemini. They've really been ramping up their team. And my understanding is that Quintes will only be, this isn't his full-time. He's not joining as a partner. He's going to be, an advisor, similar to how, for example, Giancarlo was an advisor to companies like BlockFi. So this isn't going to be a full-time role or anything, but it's definitely something he is working on.
And he happens to be a guest on First Mover tomorrow morning, so be sure to tune in for that, folks. All right, Nick, we got to wrap it there, but thanks for joining us. That was Coindesk Managing Editor of Global Policy and Regulation, Nick Day. And that's it for First Mover. Thank you, Lawrence Lewitton. I'm your host, Christine Lee. I'll be back live at 3 p.m. for all the Bitcoin. Coming up at noon, it's The Hash. You're watching Coindesk TV.